Okay, we are recording. So, welcome to the Ultra Running Sam podcast. James Elson.
Thanks very much. Pleasure to be here.
What is that lovely background you've got for the viewers that are watching on the video version?
That is the backdrop that I had on for the Winter Downs 200 group Zoom session the other night, or I should rather call it a webinar. So we've got a 200-mile race next month. That's an inaugural event. And because it's pretty extreme for us and brand new, we did a full webinar for all entrants. So I just threw up a background of the South Downs to set the mood for that, really.
Awesome. Right. Well, we will talk about that definitely. But first off, the question that I need to ask, which just lately I've been forgetting to ask this question when I'm interviewing people, is could you just sort of give us a bit of your background, your origin story, if you're a superhero, where you came from, how you got to be where you are now, and how you got into running, etc. Go back as far as you like, as much detail or as little detail as you like.
Oh, okay. I entered the MDS when I was 22, so that would have been 2000 and end of 2004. Yeah. And ran the MDS with a friend of mine. We were a bit out of shape, living in London, just fresh out of uni. And he'd seen a documentary with James Cracknell and Ben Fogle. Actually, it might have just been Ben Fogle, I forget. The two are intertwined in my memory. And we went and ran the MDS, and it was really a one-off. It was like just an adventure to get a sort of... We always loved the outdoors. It was just an excuse to get out and about. And then we did nothing for a year. And then we found the 4 Desert Series by Racing the Planet. Started getting involved in those. And that opened my eyes to the big wide world beyond, really. And I started going longer and longer. I entered Badwater, having run a couple of 100-milers. And then I got to Western States and Leadville in 2011. And at that point, I'd sort of set the ball rolling with Centurion Running, which is still going strong. We're principally an event organizer of long distance ultra trail events in the Southeast. So we had our first 100-mile event in August of 2011. And since then, we're up to a portfolio of 10/11 races, depending on what's happening in any given year, ranging between 50K and 200 miles. We have a coaching business, which I began in 2012 with Ian Sharman. We then went our separate ways. We've now got a coaching team of 8 or 9 coaches, I can't remember. That's headed by Robbie Britton. And in 2013, we opened our online ultra running store, which is now online and in person. We have a shop, and all those things kept going, really. My own running journey, I guess it's gone through various cycles. I was into the 24-hour scene. I've always been into the bigger, harder stuff. I've done the UK rounds. I've done probably quite a good selection of the bigger marquee events, around the globe that people have probably heard of as kind of bucket list races. I was lucky enough that I was a bit ahead of the boom in the sport, and it was a lot easier to get into some of them back when I started. So I've had the opportunity to race a lot of the bigger marquee events, and that passion for it hasn't changed, really. So I'm still just as excited and motivated as ever, and that hopefully comes through in the events we organize now.
So you well and truly have pretty much like dedicated your life to ultra running from the minute go. You've just sort of dived in and really gone.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I've always been quite extreme personality. I'm either really into something or I'm not that bothered. For me at uni, it was football. I was a massive Queen's Park Rangers fan, going to 40+ games a year, probably living a bit of an unhealthy lifestyle, big into music, going to loads of gigs and festivals. And then I changed tack and ultra running sort of took over, I suppose. But it is a real sort of, it's a passion and a livelihood sort of thing. It took a long time to get it there. Don't get me wrong. I didn't just start Centurion and it started paying the bills. It was years and years before we made it actually work. But yeah, I'd say it's been great because for the last decade, probably, it's been both my passion and my livelihood, which is kind of ideal from my point of view.
Yeah. So would you say you're sort of an all or nothing kind of guy then?
Oh, massively. Yeah, yeah. I mean, you ask my wife, it's a nightmare. Like I'm either completely into something and doing it all, or just sat on the sofa. There's no in between level,
Yeah.
you know. So
It made me laugh like as you were saying that, because I was just thinking that's exactly how I am with stuff as well. I absolutely throw myself into something if it's worth doing and you love it, you just want to do it 1,000%, don't you? And just keep doing it and keep doing it and keep doing it
yeah,
until.
I don't always know if that's super healthy. It definitely not the most compatible always with relationships, but
Yeah.
you know, at least you know what you're gonna get. Like it's all or nothing for sure. Yeah.
Well, I say to a mate of mine, Ben Wells, we had similar sort of backgrounds of obsession with stuff, and we say, well, you say to your wife, there's worse things in life that you could be addicted to, and so it's not drugs, alcohol, and women anymore. It's
Yeah,
ultra
there is that. Yeah, there is that. Yeah.
running. Yeah, a bit healthier obsession. Yeah, so those days are far behind me. If you're listening, Kate, she's not listening. She never listens to the podcast. um, Firstly, then, I need to get an apology out of the way for you. So, the first time we actually met in person, I shone a very bright light in your face on the spine race. You may not, you may remember this, may not remember this. So, you were coming into Bellingham, running along that little forest, the last little bit where you run from. You've come off the forest roads and you drop down past the church, and then you turn left and you go along that little
You mean
bit of the.
Burness?
Yes, Burness. Sorry, yes,
Oh,
Burness. Yeah.
that right. Yeah, I wasn't in a very good mood at that point. So I apologize in return if I was a bit
No,
hard to get anything out of.
no, I think me and Adam Jacobs, we were sort of like sat there waiting for you guys to come through to try and
Oh,
get some
right.
footage. And I didn't realize quite how bright the that little light addition is on the
Do you
GoPro
know, I
now.
thought you were going to say something else for a minute. I still looking for the culprit. I was running Lakeland 100 in 2015 or 16. I can't remember which year. I was leading the race. I was running round Galborough on the way to Dalemain, and it was about 3 a.m. And someone had the brightest light you've ever seen pointed in my face on the corner of Galborough out of nowhere, and I went smack down onto the ground and smashed my hip and had to drop out of the race. I've
No.
always wondered
Oh, man.
who that was, and I thought you were about to admit to that
I
rather
would,
than
I would admit
welcome
to
to Burness.
that. I wouldn't be
Um,
admitting that. Yeah, flipping it. That's bad.
that Burness though, that we ran that section from Bellingham to Burness. I was with Matt Neal, he's coming for his fifth or sixth finish this year, I think sixth. And we were running really well, and I think we just caught up with another runner ahead of us, and I feel like we were a bit sort of on one. You know, you're a bit sort of super focused because there's that intimidation of the Cheviots to come, and you're so close to the end, but you know it's just such a long way in from there, right?
It doesn't. It feels like you're about there though, doesn't it? Because I did the north in the summer, and once you get to that bit, it feels like you know that you've got that climb, don't you, up to the Cheviots, don't you? And then you think, once I'm on the Cheviots, what is it? Is it like a marathon from there? Is it less than a marathon
It's
from there?
almost exactly a marathon. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right.
And he thinks, well, it's just a marathon, if you knock them out
Just
on a Sunday morning. It's easy.
just with no help, no support. I mean, obviously there's the two huts up there, which were great, like sanctuaries, but it feels very committing. And with the snow down as much as it was yeah. But it was
That's
amazing. It was an amazing finish. Like I wouldn't change it anything. It was just ideal. So yeah, thanks
mm.
for being out there. It was special.
Yeah, it was a fun week for me. So the year before I'd been at Middleton. I was at the checkpoint at Middleton, and then I say it's like last year, but it's because it's so close to the race again. It's not. It's still this year, isn't it? The start
Yeah,
of this
just
year.
about. Yeah.
Um, and I managed to sort of wangle my way onto the media team to help Will out and everything. Um, yeah, no, it was a great week, and that weather, it was absolutely picturesque for photos and videos. But for you guys having to like post hole your way across, what was that like? Because I've heard you talk about this on my little bits of research I've done about your spine sort of experience. That
Right.
bit on the TV, even when I went up there in the summer, I was in a t-shirt and shorts at the bottom in the valley at Burness, like absolutely sweltering going up that climb, and didn't realize how much of an actual proper climb that is. Like you're scrambling up some sections, aren't you, on that path, like proper, like really actually climbing. And got to the top, was absolutely like pouring with sweat because it was summer, about 1 o'clock in the morning. Got to the top, and even in the middle of June, the wind up there made it feel like it was like winter. And I stopped and put every single layer back on again and set off across, trying to get out the way of the sheep that had all decided to sit on the flagstones up there and everything.
Oh, lovely. Yeah.
What was it? What was it like for you? Like, I mean, what was that climb like? Just getting up onto the Cheviets in that ice and snow.
Yeah, so the climb up was all right. At the top, there was the concern about the wind, really. We knew it was going to be a dry night. So, all things considered, I'd take what we had every day of the week over wet. And we got up there, and actually, in places, it was probably better going than normal because it was like a crusty layer. The flagstones were a mixture of ice and snow, but I'd say, again, probably better than average conditions for winter. The problem came when we got underneath the Cheviot itself. We made good ground to there, and then we were post-holing in 3 to 4 feet of snow. And it took, I mean, I looked at my watch at one point. We were, Matt and I were taking it in turns, really, to sort of lead, almost like some sort of alpine climb. And I know we were climbing at, I don't know, it's ridiculous, like 90-minute miling up that half mile or whatever it is to the actual col before you descend down to Hut 2. What absolutely blew my mind afterwards is that 3 lads actually took it upon themselves to go all the way up to the top of the Cheviot during the race, to sort of the official Pennine Way, obviously goes to the top of the Cheviot. It wasn't so much that they chucked that in, because it's that they chucked that in with conditions as they were, because that was no like gimme summit at that point. That was another grueling thing to chuck in on top. Yeah. Like Matt and I briefly went, absolutely no way, let's just crack on down. So I'd say overall it's probably better going than normal, because of the how cold it was. It had frozen everything over, but the post holding up the Cheviot was arduous at best. But as I say, I'd take that every day of the week over wet sleet. That's just the worst.
Yeah, because at the start of the race was horrific, wasn't it, with that rain?
Yeah, the first day was horrible over Kinder, and it was that wet sleet on very icy, boggy ground. Everyone was stacking it on the flagstones, and actually the lowest point of the race for me by far was Hebden Bridge. I came in there and I was thinking I'd probably pack it in. Honestly, I was looking at the train schedule. I was there in 10 and a half hours. Like, I was there in good time, but I didn't leave there in the end until about 14-15 hours elapsed, and I was then in a completely different place in the field. And actually that worked great, because if you're passing people, it turns out it makes you feel pretty great, like I'm really moving well, rather than being passed, which leaves you feeling like you're failing, basically. And then we just sort of rallied and settled into it. I was with Eddie Sutton for a long period there through Malham. In fact, all the way to Hawes we were together, and then a bit of rest, and then the race changed from there, really, and I had a really good second half.
It's amazing how that. I mean, I've done the sprint and I've done Challenger North, but even in that, it's amazing how you can be getting into a checkpoint and be feeling like you're absolutely done, and there's no way you continue, and you can't. How could you continue with how bad you feel? And then you sit down and have a meal, have a massive plate of lasagna at Alston, and have a little snooze, and then you're somehow right as rain again after having like 3 hours sleep. It's just weird, isn't it? How quickly you can sort of turn a race around.
Yep. Goes to show you how much of it's psychological, right? Like, you just have to focus on the next small section and get a bit of rest, get some sleep, eat a decent meal, and it's a brand new day. And it's that's the whole journey. That's the adventure, isn't it? It's knowing that the lows don't last, and that you'll always come back out the other side, really.
Before we move on from the spine race, I heard you were talking about the spine race before, and you say no, you didn't have any blisters, only like one
Absolutely
little.
nothing.
Is that so? I suffered really badly in the summer with blisters, but apparently people had said that it was a unique situation where it was warm. We had torrential rain all the way through the first night, and then it got really warm, and people's feet swelled, and that's where the problems with blisters came from. They said there was a higher rate of attrition for blisters, and I'm trying to convince myself that I'm going to have a better time because I'm doing the full winter. So I'm trying to convince myself that I'm not going to get those horrific blisters again.
So I think, moisture, friction, heat, they're the three components that create the circumstances to get blisters, right? You'll probably remove two of them in the winter. You shouldn't have wet feet. So if you've got a decent pair of waterproof socks on, then a high waterproof socks, as you know, you shouldn't have water coming in over the top of those socks. It's possible if the rivers are really high that could happen, but hopefully that's minimal. And you're not going to have hot feet. So it is actually probably easier to keep your feet in better condition in the winter, I would argue. The friction thing, like, I don't know, liner socks or not, I had both approaches during the race, and I don't tend to find it makes a lot of difference. But if I found my feet getting hot, the liner sock would be the first thing to go, and then you've just got that waterproof sock. So maybe it was sort of fortuitous. It's the longest race I've done in conditions like that, certainly non-stop. But the combination of footwear that I had worked an absolute treat. And obviously I was over the moon not to have feet issues, because I know they always say, oh, feet and eat. And it's absolutely right. If your feet are in decent condition and you're eating well, the race sort of is so much more enjoyable, for sure.
Yeah. I think that's something I'm sort of revising my shoes as I go. For a long time, I was an ultraman, so I always had like wide, nice foot shaped shoes, and never really had issues with blisters. Never thought I ever would have issues with blisters in long races again. And then it took me by surprise that I, literally like sort of 60 miles in the summer race, I'd like start to get blisters, and I was like, well, that's it now. Once there's no returning from once the blister starts, it never gets any better, does it? So that's the only thing that's been sort of on my mind going into the winter race is the whole blister situation, because of how absolutely horrifically painful it was.
I hope that you don't have that again. But I'm sure, like I say, if it's something you're trying to problem solve now, and then you're not got such warm conditions, you probably will find it easier to manage than I would have thought.
I'll take that, James. Thanks.
Yeah.
Sure. Let's move on from blisters. So I also heard you sort of say that given the choice of races, you wouldn't do the spine again, but you would do Tour de Géant. What attracts you to? Because they're both very long, difficult races. Is it the time of year and stuff like that, or how brutal one is against the other?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't do the spine full again, I don't think. I'm already changing tack to don't think as opposed to never again. For me, it's a huge match to burn, and I had an incredible experience and finished really, really strong and really enjoyed it. What am I set to achieve a second time? Yeah, I could probably save a huge amount of time if I executed my race a little better. Could I be competitive? Probably not. But I could do better. I can't remember what position we were, maybe 12th or something, like reasonable, but way off any kind of, podium positions. So it's sort of looking at it going, do I really want to invest all that again? And ultimately, a lot of my racing has been about the running and about the mountains. And the spine obviously is huge pack, lots of hiking, very bad ground. So I just, I did kind of tick a box for that one. TDG, to me, is the greatest race I've ever done and possibly ever will do. I just don't see how anything could get better. And It's a combination of things. It's the fact that the organization is kind of the community of the Aosta Valley. So you've got this incredible start in Cormail, which is one of my favorite places anyway. And then every refuge and checkpoint and life base is staffed by these incredible local people who do everything to look after you. The food and drinks are sensational. They even have beers at most of the refuges, which is just epic. The mountains are incredible. Like the route is, I don't know how you'd get a better route. It's so epically steep, but also got a combination of really great trail and then rougher stuff, which is more suited to us UK-based runners. Like it's way, way rougher than something like the Tour de Mont Blanc or even standard alpine trails. So that's exciting, and it keeps it maybe slightly more in our favor as British runners. But the journey, the adventure, like the non-stop nature of the race through that scenery and that terrain, I mean, it just stretches you way past what you think your limits are, but in the best possible way. And I came away just thinking, this is it. Like, I just don't know if anything could top this. I guess the other part for me is I do like bigger races, but I don't like big fields. I've raced, I mean, at the top end, things like Comrades, but more like UTMB or I think of other massive starting fields. Anything with a bigger starting field is not my cup of tea, really. And yes, TDG has 800 starters or whatever it is, but we're in 2 waves and it spreads reasonably quickly. You never feel like you're queuing for anything. And that's not me, someone who's out the front. I think I ended up top 80 maybe, but certainly for most of the race I was 200 or 300th position, nowhere. And even there I wasn't ever sort of waiting for anything. I just can't recommend it enough. I know it's a bit cliche now, like anyone who's been there is just like, oh, it's the best race ever. And I totally get to most people, like a 200-mile non-stop mountain event with 30,000 meters of climb just sounds ludicrous, but it's really not. You get a week. And we have runners like who struggle to finish our 100 milers under 30 hours getting around TDG. Don't get me wrong. You need a different level of experience, but it isn't a super tight cutoff. Some people can approach it and break it down into 50K stages and do a 50K day and take some rest and move on. So I can't recommend it highly enough.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those bucket list races, isn't it, for people? And it's interesting you say that it suits British runners. I suppose there's a few races out there. You hear like the North American runners like complain about trails over in Europe, don't you? And I always, because you've been to Western States. Went to Western States last year to have a look and did a bit of filming and stuff, and like looking at how nice the trails are out there. And over here, like it's just like you've done the Arc of Attrition and stuff, and like coastal trails, coastal paths, and really rough stuff it's kind of our bread and butter, isn't it, over here?
Yeah, I think the North American scene is very similar to our Centurion events. The trails are pretty well groomed. Actually, the first 30 miles of Western States really catches a lot of British runners off guard. You don't really see much footage from the high country because it's hard to get in there, right? And then you finally sort of see like what Jim Walmsley, the way he's running that quite rough, wet, rugged sort of single track. And it's like, it's incredible. But then from Robinson Flat onwards, it changes gear and it's proper groomed trail, like you say. And that's South Downs, North Downs-esque, like it's really good trail running, And then you get to the mountainous regions of the UK and it's a completely different level. And there isn't, don't get me wrong, I have done a couple of US races where they're as rough, but they tend not to be the mainstream events, that's for sure.
Yeah. So just sort of looking at Centurion then, was this sort of, what was your inspiration? What was North American races like Western States your kind of inspiration for Centurion and what you wanted to set up? Because I know you're obviously like a feeder race, aren't you, for a qualifying race for Western States? Was that your goal from the beginning, or did it sort of evolve as time went on?
Yeah, I went across in 2009, did Rocky Raccoon, which is in February in Texas, and is a 5 times 20-mile loop course around Huntsville State Park. And then I did Old Dominion that June, which is a 100-mile kind of a circuit around the Shenandoah Valley in Virginia. So mountainous, but not crazy. I think 15,000 feet or something like that. Completely marked, checkpoints every 10K. I could fly in as a complete, novice, didn't really know anybody, and race without worrying about having to navigate and about having to have a ton of supplies on my back from the start. I could just run with a handheld, use a drop bag system, and I didn't have crew and I didn't have pacers, but I just thought, this is great. Like, I don't, at the time there was Lakeland just started. There was the West Highland Way race, there was Grand Union, and a couple of track events. That were the only 100-mile plus races. I think Caesar's Camp had maybe just started, but that was 10-mile loops. There's just nothing like that. So I just, I then did Badwater, and I got to Western States, and I thought, yeah, you're spot on. That is exactly what I want to bring here. Hence the track finishes, the lavish aid stations, the really comprehensive course markings. But I had also done quite a bit of British racing and some European stuff as well. So I took the best ingredients from my own running experiences, really, and tried to blend them together. And it was very new for the UK. Like, when we put those first races on, the reason they were popular and we got fields that were otherwise previously unheard of is because people were like, this is really good. Like, this is, wow, this is different. And it's sort of kind of on a different level. And yeah, we had to charge a bit more money for it, but people were like, if I'm going to invest a year into training and trying to complete a 100-mile race, then this is worth the 20% extra race fee. So we immediately hit upon like a formula that worked. The only downside, which in hindsight turned out to be the biggest blessing of all, was it's so volunteer intensive. So yeah, we need 110, 120 people to put on a point-to-point 100-mile race. Well, that in time developed the community, which is the heart of everything we do. It's cliche, but you literally cannot put a race on without those people. And then they in turn become the runners and vice versa. And it builds this community, which is the most valuable thing we've done. But in the early days, getting together enough volunteers to make that happen was so difficult. It just wasn't a done thing, I think we were also slightly fortunate in terms of geography. We're in the southeast, and the density of population and the number of people who were interested in doing these new things was huge. And so we were sort of pushing a bit on an open door. And initially, I outlined the Beacons Way. I've still got the course for the Beacons Way with all the checkpoints listed. And in the end, I think GB Ultras or someone else did it. But the reason I didn't do that, or Glencoe, where we also had a race, we just didn't think we could get the volunteers, and the logistics, were going to cost a fortune. So we left those things and stuck to our own backyard, and have done that ever since, really. But yeah, you're absolutely right. Like, it was the Western States model that really sort of spurred my imagination. Buckles. Nobody had had a belt buckle in the UK before. That was us. That was Western States. Yeah.
That's I love that. When I went over, so I went over. I was on my way to Canada, and I went via California.
Right.
I went to Canada, but I flew into LA and saw a friend, and timed it so that I could go to Western States and volunteer and did a follow cam from Roby Point down to the finish. And if I never go back, that memory will stick with me, like just running like the top 10 men and women, like down from Roby Point down to the track.
Awesome.
Running around the track, and then coming back for golden hour and filming people, all the guys like and women like struggling to get to the finish, like under the cutoff and everything. Yeah. Just like having like the running around the track and the crying and stuff, and you're like trying to like hold it together, like wearing sunglasses, like I won't cry. Yeah. That race is like, it's something really special, isn't it? And I think, if you're trying to capture that same feeling and that same spirit of that race, then you can't really go wrong, can you? Because it's an absolute classic race. And if you can bring that, not glitz and glamour, but that level of how much people love that race, if you can bring that over here, then, amazing.
Yeah, that was entirely what the objective was. And I think, we've got reasonably close. We have the same starting field size as Western States, which has always had a hard limit of 380 odd imposed by the wilderness area. 30-hour cut-off, finish on a track, great point-to-point course, very varied, decent amount of climb and descent, but nothing mental, no navigation required. I mean, lavish aid stations, all those ingredients are what we kind of transplanted into the UK. And you know, I was slightly wary of, oh, this looks like a UK copycat of Western States, but we were nowhere at the start. Like, nobody knew what it was. And obviously South Downs 100 has become, or it has always been, in my opinion, kind of our premier event. And now with World Trail Majors coming in a couple of weeks ago and South Downs Way being part of that, which you might want to come on to, I don't know, but that will hopefully lift that race and that format for runners looking for something similar over this side of the water.
Yeah, absolutely. So for people that, I mean, obviously people watching and listening to this podcast will be familiar because I've been sort of banging on about the whole UTMB thing and everything for a few weeks. So this development now then, can you sort of talk about, so it's the World Trail Majors. So your South Downs Way 100, that's part of the World Trail Majors then. Can you sort of give for people sort of so they can understand how it works if they've not heard of it, what exactly is the World Trail Majors then?
Yeah, absolutely. So we launched 2 weeks ago, and essentially it was like an opening salvo. I think people were maybe anticipating, or when we launched, people were maybe anticipating a little bit more information, but we need to release the information at our pace, and there'll be a whole bank of other things to come. So I'll recap where we're at so far and what it is, with the caveat that within the next couple of weeks, the second tranche of information will come out, which will fill in a lot of the question marks, I think. But essentially, obviously, in the sport at the moment, we're going through this period of exponential growth, but at the top end of the sport, a lot of the grassroots events are actually struggling. And you're seeing that in the UK marketplace, where events are either folding, not happening, going on hiatus, or being taken over by other people. It's not a good state of affairs. Obviously, UTMB Ironman have been at the forefront of that, buying events globally or issuing by UTMB licenses after the kind of merger of Ironman UTMB to become one entity. And there were a lot of races approached around the world by UTMB Ironman who basically said no. They wanted to remain independent because they were about something more. It wasn't a financial thing. It was about the value of their trail running community. It was more than just a livelihood for them. Local, authentic, independent races with an eye on sustainability, inclusivity, all the things that make us part of that trail running community. And some of those events were previously on the Ultra Trail World Tour, which disbanded when UTMB then took their own series forward. And some of the events have then sort of grouped together, and with a few of us who weren't on UTWT, but maybe had some other things in common with regards to decisions made, got together. So 9 of us, independent races, have got together to create this new series. And yes, of course, it's a reaction to the direction the sport's taken, but it's not just UTMB Ironman. We've had Spartan World Series, Golden Trail World Series, World Mountain Running Association have got their series. There's a bunch of other series going on, and there seems to be something for everybody, except if you want to race bigger, marquee, kind of incredible global ultras, longer global ultras, that are actually independent, that are authentic, that have their own set of values, but values that sort of underpin all of these events. So we kind of got together and started talking, obviously quite a while ago, way before any of this Whistler Alpine Meadows, Gary Robbins issue cropped up. I think a lot of people were like, oh, wow, this is an amazing reaction to that. It's got nothing to do with that whatsoever. There was just strange coincidence of timing. The fact that people thought within 2 weeks we could turn around a world series of events and a website and a video, let alone everything else, within 2 weeks is kind of crazy. But anyway, so the series really is designed to promote the values that we all, as race directors and organizations, uphold in the sport. All the things that I've just mentioned. I guess the main questions that came out of the announcement were around what it means for runners. How is it sustainable if we're encouraging people to travel to more than one event? And what's the scoring system / is there any prize money, at the elite end of the sport? So just briefly to touch upon those things, we only want people really to compete in 2 events. We want you to do your local race. So for British runners or European runners, that's the South Way 100. And then we want you to choose one other, and that's your bucket list kind of big trip, like put all your eggs in that basket and get to one of these epic other events. So Ultra Trail Cape Town, Quebec Mega Trail, Swiss Canyons, Mount Fuji 100, Trans Gran Canaria, Madeira Island, Hong Kong 100K, and Black Canyon 100K, which is an Aravaipa event in the US. Only 2 races can count towards your series competing or completing. It's only 2 events. So we don't want people necessarily flying off around the world doing all 9. We want to focus on one and then pick one international trip. Needless to say, the series will grow. It won't remain at 9 events. So for some people, it's like, well, there's such big, expensive trips, like it's not really accessible to me. Absolutely get that. You'll see in time more continental events in Europe that are accessible and less expensive and available to you with overland travel. So it's a starting point, and it's a conversation that's been growing for some time between a group of like-minded organisers to present an alternative to the options that are already out there. It's not for everyone, but we believe that a lot of the trail running community have wanted this and will want this and will be part of the journey with us, and hence the reason for us setting it up, really.
So it's quite a simple format then, isn't it? Quite a simple idea. There's no collecting points and collecting stones.
There's no stones, there's no points, there's no overriding like commercial angle to it. We just want trail. We want to support each of our events. We want to support the local areas we operate in. We are creating a set of values that essentially will. I mean, you'll see us working. For prime example, she races. The first thing we're going to do in the conversation we've got tomorrow afternoon, which is kind of the next steps, is discuss the she races event guidelines and how we implement them as a series. Stuff like that become accessible to us, and that as a shared group, obviously, I'm bringing that in because of speaking with Sophie and Sophie's involvement in our events, bringing that to the group, and that's falling on open ears. They're like, this is exactly the direction we want to go in. The other crucial part of this is we're an association of 9 events. Each has a completely even democratic share of voice. There's no like this event's in charge or we're beholden to this entity. We share the voice and we share the decisions we make. And that, we believe, is the best way to move the sport forward with the right values. So it's very exciting for us to be part of, quite frankly.
Yeah. Will there be a cap on how many races are part of it? Have you got that in? Is that something you can talk about now?
I'll be brutally honest. That hasn't been decided. There are several directions we can go in. Obviously, there's been plenty of races subsequent to the launch approach the group and sort of say, individual races within the group or the group in general, saying, how do we become a part of this thing? And we need to set the guidelines and principles and how and when other races become part of the series. But there absolutely will be growth in the series. Where we cap it is a decision yet to be made. I'm not going to lie to you and say, we've organized everything, the charter's there. The next things you'll see are the details on the scoring system, possibly details of series sponsors, which will be sponsors who have similar outlook to us, similar things in common, that aren't going to clash with any existing sponsors for any of the events or cause issues with local markets or the international community. And then you'll see announcements about prize money and what it means for both elite, but also everyday runners who want to compete in the series. That will all come next. I think growth of the series and what events will be added will be 2024 into 2025. These 9 events will be the only events for 2024 as it stands.
So Will there be a situation where there'll be more than one in the UK then, or is it going to be one in
Quite
each country?
possibly. Yeah, we haven't set a stall out to say there's only one per nation. The you can tell from the style of events that are involved what events might likely fit well with the group and which are probably not going to fit well with the group or are already part of other series already, then that's fine. But there's so much change in the landscape at the moment. It's a time of flux, and I think for us it's about trying to create a cohesion that we're adding the right components to rather than complicating things even more. So it's really important that we move things forward in the right way and we decide those things together. I think it's quite possible you see other UK races, certainly other UK territories. Whether that's 25 or 26, I'm not sure, but I think it's highly likely.
Where this is a big question. Where do you think we're headed in trail running? Because at the minute it feels a little bit us and them and a bit divided. What's your? I mean, you're in the industry. You're at the sharp end of it. What is your? Are you worried about trail running in the UK and globally, or how do you think things are gonna pan out?
It's a good question. I think the short, almost flippant answer is there's something for everybody, and the sport will be voted on with people by their feet. People will enter what they want to enter. I mean, ultimately, I take my RD hat off and my TRA chairman hat off because obviously from that position I see the whole picture of how many permits we're issuing as a TRA, which is the same number as 2019, yet participant levels are back at 2016 levels. So we've got a saturation of events with a level of participants that's down 30% over the course of the last 4 years. It never recovered post-COVID. So if I just look at the UK market, massive concern. I took the Ridgeway on, the Ridgeway 86 was a TRA event for the first time in 23 because they're down to under 100 runners. This is a classic British running event in its 20th year. So one of the longest standing ones, the whole of the Ridgeway in one go. And we're struggling it's also the British Trail Running Championships, struggling to get 100 runners. And things, honestly, participant-wise, don't look any stronger for 24. So that is a massive concern because some of the historically sort of important events to the British trail running community are going by the wayside. On the flip side, I do believe events have a life cycle, some of them. I mean, obviously, Western States is going to carry on getting bigger and bigger until God knows what happens. They've got some difficult decisions to make. And they're in a great position. Lakeland gets bigger and bigger, could get bigger and bigger every year. Those events, that they'll be okay. They've got the community around them and they've been looked after in the right way and they're super exciting and they're growing. And there's certainly no issue with Centurion events. We've always been well supported. But some of the other sort of more fringe events or smaller events or lower key events, which don't have a marketing presence and don't have any social media, they are going. That's a concern. I think the big question for me is where globally UTMB Ironman direction travel is only going one way with Ironman. That their business model is growth. They're never ever going to change that. That you're just going to see more and more and bigger. That's one-way traffic. And obviously that has led already to some lashback from the community, Whistler Alpine Meadows. But let's not forget that happened 2 years ago with Andorra as well, when Rhonda Del Sims and the associated events went, and the Andorra 100k event came in as a collab between UTMB Ironman and the local government there. Like, it's not the first time, and it will continue to happen. They'll probably aggressively move into some markets, but they will have support. People will keep doing their events and they won't mind ruffling a few feathers along the way. For us, it's about offering an alternative to that movement that's maybe in our minds more in keeping with trail running spirit, trail running community. That's what we're there to offer. Just an alternative. We're not competing against them. They'll do just fine, no matter what we do. Ultimately, I don't, the sport's growing. I don't, there's any doubt that we're on this trajectory where overall internationally the sport is going to continue to grow. It's definitely got a very bright future, but my concerns are over how it's managed and essentially making sure that we don't cause a lot of damage along the way, that everyone feels that they can be part of this community. I think we'll be okay. I would hate to say, you know, in 5-10 years' time exactly what the landscape's going to be, but I am hopeful. I think ultimately we're a really responsible community as a whole, and we'll get it to where it needs to be. But there will be a bit of collateral damage along the way, that's for sure.
Yeah, definitely. But what are your thoughts on why participation is down? Is it like financial reasons, do you think, or interest in the sport? 'Cause I still can't figure out what it is.
So I was at a conference on Friday, and Martin Stone, the legend Martin Stone, who also happens to own SI Entries, gave us some good analysis into the data. And actually, in the younger age groups, only 10% of event participants, and he was looking at running, cycling, and swimming, so it's not strictly just trail running. Only 10% of participants are under 30. But that number is unchanged. Where the change is happening is in the 30 to 50 bracket, which for us is, I mean, the average participant in a trail run, an ultra, certainly trail running event in the UK is like 42, which I think is probably slap bang about where we are, right? Like, you know, so we are typical white male, early 40, you know, absolutely atypical trail run, but there's less of us. And that little drop in that market is what's causing this problem. I do think it's kind of cyclical in terms of once the demand for events drops and entries are available later than normal, and the sort of the panic to get your entry in, otherwise you might not get a place, has gone, but for all but a few of the very top events. And therefore, and people are spending later. We know that from retail data as well. People are spending later. So there's slightly less demand. People are under less pressure to enter. So they're leaving it later. And actually, when they get nearer to the event, they're much less likely to enter because training didn't go well, or they got sick along the way. And rather than having had that entry for 9 months, they're like, well, thank God I didn't enter in the first place. There's still places available, but I'm not going to take one. So I think it is a product of inflation and spending crisis, cost of living crisis, but it's more nuanced than that. And it is a cycle, and it's sort of spiraled down a little bit. And hopefully it doesn't go any further, because as I say, it is having an impact now, and we are losing some events.
Yeah, hopefully it'll spiral back up again, especially when you think about the amount of people that have taken up running, you know, in the pandemic. That they started. There's so many people, you know, I do a bit of coaching, and you know, I had a few people that were just like, I started running in lockdown just for something to do, and now I want to start doing longer ultras and stuff. So you'd think that there must be a bit of maybe there's just a bit of a delay in those people getting to the point where they start entering really big races, or maybe they've just done it and decided it's not for them to go back.
I think that is still there. And I think actually at the root of it all, the runner numbers are probably not that much changed. I think we do have too many races. We had too many races in 2019 when participant levels were 30% above what they are now. The market is currently absolutely saturated. And I don't... Listen, I've been there myself thinking, I know what I'll do. I'll put a race on. Like I can't speak negatively of anybody that right now thinks I'm going to follow my dream and put on this awesome race on the trails that I love. It good for you, go for it. But if you're doing it now, and there's a reason we're not banging new events on all the time, you are coming into an incredibly difficult marketplace, and a very saturated one. And honestly, I see some of the events that pop up, which are on in exactly the same areas as existing events that are doing, you know, a good job, but perhaps not super well supported, and then expecting to sell numbers. It's not the right time. And I think that will change for sure. Give it a few years, that will likely change. But I think some events are going to have to go by the wayside before we get to that point.
Yeah, very true. So where do you sort of see the future for Centurion then? How have you got sort of Are you still at the point where you're making 5-year plans, or are you sort of
Always.
just?
Yeah. No. I mean, obviously, the whole point, everything we've ever done is to grow very slowly, organically, sustainably. And you don't see us banging 5 new events on a year. We usually add one or take one away. So next year, the track hundreds on a 1-year break. Wendover Woods Weekender, we've put the 100 and the 50k on hiatus, and we brought the 50 mile back in November. Small changes. We added the 50k at 100 hills this year, like we talked about. It feels like last year, but this year. So that kicks our season off. So that's new, because that really is bringing people into our longer races. Everything we do has been a difficult 50 and more till now. So bringing a 50k was logical. And actually that's been, I mean, we've sold 600 entries already for that for next year, which is tremendous. And obviously we've added this 200 mile winter event, which was a direct result of my experience running 200s and things that I wanted to be able to offer our community in our area. Let's be brutally honest, the spine is several levels beyond anything we've done before at Centurion. And it's certainly several levels beyond our Winter Downs 200. Is our Winter Downs 200, though, there's a step between that or a step beyond for our community? 100 starters, yes, it is. And that's exciting. And that's why it's been well supported. For 24, really, and probably beyond, the intention really is to stick largely with what we've got, with subtle changes, and really invest into the events you already have. And the South Downs Way 100 being part of World Trail Majors, that will be the one that sees the most love, I suppose. But there'll be, the option to add another 50k, the option to, expand the Winter Downs 200, perhaps, if things go well, other distances, bringing Wendover back. But we'll stay in our lane. I don't see us splashing out into Lake District or going international or, trying to take over the world. We're quite happy doing what we do with our community sort of at the heart of it already.
Yeah. So the trend for 200s then, do you think that's something is 200s the new 100?
It's just different. Like, I've heard that several times, and I totally get it. Like, it's correct in the sense that a lot of people have run hundreds now, and they're looking for the next thing. And the obvious next steps from doing a Centurion race are Lakeland, Arc of Attrition, trying to go and race 100 abroad, moving into the mountains. That's all good. The 200 is a completely different event. It's when you're chucking in the need to sleep, completely changing the nutrition from something that you can kind of wing off, like, basic carbs for a day, to I need to be able to fuel myself for 4, 5, 6 days. It's a completely different sport, and it's an adventure and a journey in a way that 100 will never be. So I just feel that they're very, very different. And my heart has always been with the 100-mile distance. It's the thing I've done the most, and the thing I still probably will always go back to. The 200s, I can see myself doing them, probably one a year, realistically, but I'm certainly not about to try and do 3 or 4 in a calendar year, whereas I think the 100s you can jump into off a shorter training block and maybe burn a few less matches than the 200s, So I think they're different, and I think the growth in the market has led to growth in 200s, but the starting fields are so small in the 200s, it's not really, going to take away from everything else.
Sure, actually, you can't be like putting in for like 3 200s.
I mean, you can. I just really wouldn't advise it. I just found the recovery from 100, like, obviously it can take weeks, it can take months, and you need to be aware of that. But the way I felt after 200s, mainly because of the sleep deprivation, is that absolutely obliterated, like falling asleep at your desk at 10 in the morning, hunger beyond belief sort of thing. And if you're about, anybody tries to tell you that you should do that regularly, then I would ask some serious questions.
Yeah, running's good for you up until a point, isn't it? But ultra running, running for multiple days with no sleep, it's not advisable. But it's fun.
It is, and as long as you pick and choose your events and try and make it sustainable, it's all good. It's just over racing is a killer, and you have to learn the hard way sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, That's awesome. I really appreciate you coming in and chatting and giving some background information on. And I still haven't got to do a Centurion race. I think because I'm up in the Midlands and I'm sort of I'm close to the Peak District. I'm sort of always sort of bobbing around in the Peak Districts and occasionally venture north to the lakes, but yeah, I don't really venture south for races. But yeah, I've admired Centurion races from afar. I've got a few friends that live south, and they always rave about how good they are and everything. So I know it's something that I need to do, especially if I want to try and get to Western States at some point. Then I'll be down for the qualifying race. Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, look, like the best thing about the UK is every area's got its local scene, its local races. There's great local options, and rarely do people tread on each other's toes. Like, John Steele's got Hardmoors. Am I about to go and do something in Cleveland Way? No, John Steele does that. Like, there's great races in the Peak District. The Lake District is saturated with events. I think, principally supporting your local events is a great shout. What's different about ours is that you step in and become part of a new community and see that our community, that would be why I'd come and do something from ours, and you'd probably go away with a really great sort of experience because of that, because of the way you're looked after. But yeah, look, we're blessed here, and there are great races never really, so I absolutely don't blame you for staying where you are, and good luck at the Spine. I look forward to hearing about how well your feet stood up to the challenge of the winter edition.
Yeah, hopefully I'll get to the end. Yeah, that's
I'm sure you will.
I'll try.
Good stuff.
Anyway, brilliant. Thanks, James. Appreciate you coming on. Thanks for that.
Cheers.